Hello and welcome back. This is going to be the first of a few videos where it's just a bit more loosely structured. I'm not going to have as much of a script, but I'm just going to go through my workflow for making some kind of a scene. So in this one I'm going to be making a bedroom scene. To start off with, you always want to get some reference images up, which I use a program for PureRef for. All you have to do, open it up, and then you can go to anywhere, so I'm using Chrome, just anywhere that you want a picture. You can just drag and drop it straight from the site and it'll save it. Then it will always save the reference back to that picture so that you don't need the Chrome open. You can just save this reference file with any number of pictures on it on a scrolling canvas, just whatever you want. So just get some images which match the kind of scene that you want to make. So here you can just pick the ones you want. You can scale them up if you want. Just pick a few and make sure it's got some with zoomed in parts. So say I'm doing a sash window like that, I would search for photos of a sash window and then I would get close up so that when I'm modelling it, it's a bit more accurate, because you always think that you can guess what things look like or you remember what they look like, but there are always parts you forget, and that's one of the biggest causes of having renders that just don't quite look right, is things which you think that you know how to model, but there are just parts that you forget. So it's always worth having lots of reference images. You can never have too many, and obviously just pick the images which fit the kind of style that you want. So they're all different ones here, but you can just pick whatever you want in a scene, which is the beauty of modelling in 3D. You can just pick how you want it to look and then make it like that. So I'm getting even accurate pictures of windowsills and how they're made up. It doesn't obviously matter how they're made up inside, you won't be seeing that, but the way that the form goes, it's just small details like that which will make your whole render look a lot more realistic. And it's things like that which you'll notice when you're looking at the render at the end, but you won't quite be able to pinpoint why it looks so realistic, and it's just small details like that. And get a few images of things that you want as just little optional extras in your room. Obviously you're just personalising your scene however you want, but I want some things like this in, so I'm just going to get a few pictures of similar things so that I can pick what I want later. And so I've got a lot of inspiration, so I can make my own thing, but it'll be realistic. But I'll show you a little tip later for saving time in scenes when you're adding small things like pots and things which are repeatable. And I'll show you in a bit a tip I've got for when you've got lots of repeatable things like little pots and stuff, things which you'll likely use in more than one scene and you don't want to have to model it every time. There's quite an easy way in Blender where you can just save them all in one place and then bring them into whichever scene you want, so I'll show you that a bit later when it becomes more relevant. Okay, so I've got a few basic reference images now, so I'm just going to zoom in on the ones just for the basic room and then I'll start modelling. And now if you think about what a room really is, it's just a square, so a cube in Blender, and then we need to cut out a hole for the window. So we can just make the cube, scale it however we want, so I'm just pressing S to scale and then Shift Z, which will scale it on every axis apart from the Z axis, so that it's a little bit bigger. Then I'm pressing Tab to go into edit mode, Control R to add some loop cuts, and then you just left click and you can move it left and right. So I'm going to add a couple of loop cuts in like this, add 2 here, and now if I keep them selected and press SZ, you can scale them both up on the Z axis so that they're both, you can just pick the size of your window like that, and then G and Z to move them up. If you press Shift, then you get a bit more fine control when you're moving around. And now I'm going to press 3, which will go into face select. You see up here in the top left, you can select vertices, edges, or faces. So I can select this face, press X for delete, and then just choose faces, and it'll delete that one face. And now if we look back at our reference images, you'll see that the window sort of insets a little bit. So to do that, all we've got to do, I'm going to go to Edge Select by pressing 2, and if you click Alt and then click on one of the edges around the loop, it will automatically select the whole loop. And then E to extrude, and instead of it just going randomly, press Y and it'll lock it to the Y axis, and then just drag it out a little bit. Again, I'm just using Shift to get some finer control. And then if you want it to be as realistic as this, obviously it has a couple of little steps. So to do that, all you have to do is press E and then right click to snap back, and then just scale it very slightly down and then extrude it again on the Y axis. And then that's it. So now that's ready to start modelling the actual window. And we can model the window as just part of the same object as the house, and then we can just assign the materials later. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're just going to press E again, scale in. So we can just scale that down, but you'll see that it's scaling a little bit too much on the sides and not enough on the top. So you can just press S and then X and scale it back up so that it looks about right. And then just E, Y, E, scale it down. It's just a bunch of steps really to make one window. And then you can just leave it like that. You see from the inside it looks pretty good. for a window this size you probably would have a few slats coming down. So there's a few ways you can do those. I'm going to add a loop cut in the middle and then add one here, but you see it comes off at a slant, so it's trying to go to each side. To make it lock to that middle one so that it's always completely straight, you can press E and that will lock it. You can press F and then it will lock it to the other one, but we want it to the middle, so I'll just press F again and then just add it there. And now we can press 3 to go into face select again and just select that inside face and then E and just extrude it all the way down. And now if we want it to just perfectly touch there, if you press Shift Tab it'll turn on the locking mode up here, so that's just a kind of snapping feature. At the moment it's just on increment, which is fairly useless. Put it on vertex and now you can press G and Z and it will lock to every time you hover over one of the vertices, so we can just do it there. But the problem at the moment is that now it's got the 4 vertices from that one, but it's also got the ones that were there before, so there's going to be duplicates on the same spot, and that can cause all sorts of shading issues and geometry issues if you try to add subdivision surface and things like that. So to get rid of all of that, just press A to select everything, and then go to Mesh, and then Clean Up, and then Merge by Distance. And you see it removed 12 vertices, so it's cleaned it up a bit, and that means that it won't be, having any shading issues. So now we can set up the camera on the inside. So you can kind of position your viewport just by using pan and orbit, and then if you press Control Alt and 0 on the numpad, it'll just snap the camera right to your view. And then to get some finer control, you can press N to bring the sidebar view and then lock camera to view, and you can just scroll around and it will keep the camera looking where you are. Now I want my camera to be a bit more wide angle for this, so you need to select the camera. You can do that around the outside or up here. Go over to it here, and then if you reduce the focal length, so a greater focal length is more zoomed in, a wider one is more wide angle. So position that about how you want. That looks about right for me. And then undo lock camera to view, because otherwise every time you move the camera is going to follow you. And now if you press Z and go into rendered mode, you can see we need to set up some lighting. So at the moment it's got global illumination, we don't want any of that. Or we can have a little bit and just use it for the sky colour. So I'll turn it all the way up, put it on a very pale blue, so that looks a bit more like a sky. And then if we want a sun coming in, we can set that up ourselves with a sun lamp. You can use an HDRI if you want the look, but I find that setting it up yourself you get a lot more control. So an HDRI is a lot quicker, but if you set it up with lamps then you can make it look exactly how you want, and that's what I'm aiming for here. So I'm just going to press Shift A, go to light and then set up sun. Press G to grab it around. If you press R you can see you're only rotating it on the whatever axis you're looking at it, but if you press R twice you get this sort of orbit tool. So I'm going to use that and I'm going to point it so that it's pointing just into the room. Press 1 or 3 on your numpad and you can just see from the side. G and then R, and it doesn't actually matter whether the sun lamp is itself. It's as if all of the light is going in the direction of that arrow. It's not all coming from one point. It's a different kind of lamp to, there we go, the original point lamp, it's all going to come from that spot. But the sun lamp is just saying which direction it's all pointing, so it's as if that point is infinitely far away, which makes more sense when you think about it as our actual sun on Earth is obviously very, very far away compared to the size of Earth, so it's really as if it's all pointing in one direction, all the shadows are parallel. So you can move it around, point it where you want. That looks about right, and then if you press 0 to go into the camera view and then go into rendered view, you can see where it's pointing. So I want it a bit more visible, so I can press R and R again here, use the shift little tip so you can hold shift and make it a bit more accurate when you're moving it around, and then just move it until it looks about how you want. So I want it like that. Now if we look at our reference images, the edges are very slightly bled, so they're not completely hard edges, partly because the windows are made of glass which isn't perfectly transparent, so it kind of blurs them a little bit. But you can just increase the angle of the sun lamp until those look about how you want. So I'm just using Control B here to select a small section, which means that it will render that a lot faster. So I'm just going to increase the angle, say try 1, maybe 2 degrees, and that'll make the edges a little bit softer, which I think looks a lot nicer. And obviously it is a stylistic choice, so you can go a lot higher and it'll be much softer light, but that's just quite unrealistic. So it won't end up looking as realistic in the end, but it might fit the kind of style that you're going for. But I'll leave it about 2 so it looks realistic enough. And now we can add some things, and now we can start adding some things on the inside of the room. So maybe I'll add a bed in this corner, so just a cube to start off with that, scale it down, 7 to go to the top view and then go into wireframe, and then we can just move it around, scale it, move it like this, scale it just on the x-axis maybe, put it in the corner. I just keep flipping back to the camera view to see how it's looking, because that's obviously the final render is going to be from the camera view, so it's important to see how it looks. SZ and just scale it down, make it sort of the mattress size, put it maybe there, rendered, and just see how that looks. Looks a little bit big maybe for this scene, so I'll just scale that down a little bit more. Maybe put it back in the corner. That looks about how I want it. So now we need to start making some of the bed frame. So fairly easy way to do that is to just alt click and select the outside ring of faces. Now if you press E, they're going to come out really wonky. They're going to all come straight up or straight down, not much use at all. But if you press Alt E and choose extrude faces along normals, they'll each come out the way that they're pointing. So I want to just extrude them a little bit out. Alt E to select this row again, and then extrude them slightly up. So now we've got this sort of bed frame with a mattress on the inside. It's looking quite good. Now, if you want to be able to see the bottom, obviously it's a bit of a pain that this whole room's in the way, and you can select it and hide it, but I find a much easier way is if you're working on one thing, if you press / on your keyboard, it'll go into a highlight view where you can just see the object you're working on, and then you can work on it all, do whatever you want, press / again, you'll come right back to where you were. So it's really helpful for when you're just doing a little bit of editing. You don't want to have to hide every object, and that's obviously even more important when you've got loads of objects in your scene. You don't want to be doing that every time, hiding all the objects, so it saves a lot of time in the end. So now you want to make the legs of the bed. So I'm going to add a couple of loop cuts, scale those out on the x-axis, put them about there, a couple more loop cuts and them on the y-axis, and then I just select these faces which I've made on the inside, go to one inside view. Actually I'll go into slash so that I can see the floor again and go into wireframe, because now when I extrude them down, I can press E to extrude them down and then just put them right next to the floor. You don't want them going through the floor, because obviously in real life they'll have a slight bevel on the edge, which it's too small to notice in this scene, but they will have a very slight shadow on the sides, which you can actually tell if you use that Control B again to just highlight a small section. That very slight shadow on the bottom does just make it look a lot more realistic, because obviously if there's a carpet or there's slight dirt on the floor, it's not going to sit perfectly on the floor, so it's just one of those things that will make your scene look more realistic, but you won't quite know why. But it's always worth doing, leaving a little bit of space. So now we can add a headboard, so I'll just press / again, go back into the highlight view. We can add that just on here, so I'm going to extrude these. We could do these top ones, but then it would have that angle on the side, which doesn't look very good, so I'm going to select these, extrude them out, and then I can select these top ones and extrude them up, because they'll have that straight edge on the side. So I'll just put that up, what looks about right, maybe there. Press / to go back into full view. Yeah, that looks quite good. Although it's going through the wall, so we'll have to go back to top view and move it around until it's back in the room. So obviously it's still all just how you like it personally, so you can make your bed look any way you want, and you can use any kind of reference images to style it from beds that already exist. So next thing to do will probably be to start adding some small little bits into the scene, but actually I'll just make a windowsill first, so that'll let me, I can put some things on the windowsill. So an easy way, if you've got a few things and we want, say, a windowsill here, select these, press Shift D and then Z and move them just very slightly up, and now press P and selection, and now you've got a new object, which it's not touching because we moved it slightly, so that's just to avoid those duplicate vertices we were talking about earlier. But if you just press Tab and select them, A to select all of it, now you've got this new object, and we can just press E, modify it as we would normally, and it's in exactly the right place. So I'm just gonna, change this. Look at that reference image I was talking about earlier, so you see it's got that curve on the edge, it's got some slight bevels. So to do that curve, I'm just gonna press 2 and go into this, Alt to select that loop. And then if I press Control B, I can bring that up, and if I scroll with my mouse wheel, then I can add it a bevel like that. And now you see it's lots of separate faces, which doesn't look very good. So the way that we're going to fix that right click and click shade smooth, but now we've got those strange shading on the side. So to fix that, we're going to go over here into normals on the little vertex panel and just select auto smooth. So what that'll do is any angle between two faces that's 30 degrees or less, it's going to smooth over, and any that are greater than 30 degrees, so say these ones are 90 degrees, it's going to make them nice and sharp. So it just fixes it all for you. It saves you a lot of time and effort. You used to have to select each face around it and select just the ones you wanted smooth, but it's a lot easier now. So that's looking better. We've got a little windowsill, so now we can start putting things on it. So this is coming to that tip that I was talking about earlier. You can save a lot of time. You don't want to model all your pots and things. If you've ever had a scene where you've used them, as long as you put them in one collection, you see you've got collections over here, you can just bring it into another scene. So if I go to File and then Append, I can just pick this pots file which I've made in the past, and then I can just go into Collection and choose whichever ones that I want. So you can set up these however you want. You can have whichever collections you like for things that you use frequently. So ideally you'll have them for all kinds of objects. You'll have them for pillows, for pots, for plug sockets, anything you like. So I want some, say some plastic pots, little plant pots on there. So I'll just select my plastic pots one and it'll import them all in here. So they're the wrong size, I'll have to scale them down and make it all fit. But it's a lot easier than having to model them all every single time you create a new scene. So you can I'm just pressing G to move these around and then lift them up and down to make them line up with the windowsill, but again, it just saves a lot of time compared to having to model everything like that every time. And now we've just got a little bit more, we'll just make sure they're not going off the edge of the windowsill. We've just got a lot more realism with really no extra effort. We've just imported some stuff that we've made in the past, and then, you know, see these are all here, they're in their plastic pots collection. If you want to get rid of them, you can just hide them. It's just really easy. So maybe I want to do the same but with some ornamental pots, so all I have to do is the same, goes to the ornamental pots one, they'll all import. So you can use models that you've got from someone else, but I've made these myself. So all you have to do is put them into one collection in a separate file, and then you can just use them in any scene you like, and it just big time saver really. A few little pots, some bits and pieces, it just makes the scene look a lot more realistic. It makes the room look a bit more lived in. Even with no mattress, there's no paint on the walls, it's just a few pots, and it's made the whole scene really come together right at an early stage. So it really helps just bringing in some small things. So now I'm going to start work on the walls. So all I want to do, first of all, is separate this window. So because we're going to be using a different material for that, we just want to separate it early on before we have to do anything else. So to do that, I'm going to select just a loop of the window, well, 3 into face view, and then select a loop like this. And then if I just press Control and then plus, and it has to be the plus on a numpad, not the plus that's, that'll zoom in if you use the plus that's next to your backspace. Control and plus, and just keep pressing it, and it'll just expand your selection until it selects all of it. And now we can press P like we did last time in selection, and now we've got a separate object for our window, so we can name these over the side. It'll just make it a bit easier to deal with. Name the windowsill. There we go. And now when we select this, it's just the room. In fact, we can even do the same with the floor. Obviously it's a bit broken up, so we can just go up here, press B to go into select, and then just select the floor like that. It's got the ceiling as well, so you can just, if you hold your scroll wheel and then select, then it'll get rid of it. P selection, and now we've got the floor. And now we can just edit the walls. So I'm going to make a new material, call it walls. I'm going to do some shading for this one. You do it procedurally and make a nice wallpaper. So to start off with, I'm going to put a noise texture in. Put the factor right into the color, and then lower the scale a lot. And now I'm going to put it through a color ramp. Change the color ramp to constant so that there's no gradient, and then bring it up so that there's just a solid line like that. And now what I'm going to do is just add another point in and put that black on the other side, and then just bring that in, and that will make this stripe which goes across the wall there like that. So that's just how I want my wall to look. But I don't want the walls to be black, I want them to be basically white, or maybe I'll put them at slightly off-white. So then I'll do the same with this one, just use the color picker and get the same color. and then I can choose what colour my stripe can be. So maybe a pink stripe, that looks quite nice, maybe a blue one. I like how it looks with that one. So you just leave it, you know, you can just do it however you want. And this is just an example of how you can make it procedurally. So obviously I've not used a picture for this, and that means that I can change this scale around if I want to, you know, make it look a bit different, or, you know, make it much bigger. It just depends on what kind of look you want. And obviously because it isn't a picture, it's not dependent on the resolution of anything. It'll just scale infinitely and it'll never lose any quality. So I'll put those in. And now we want to add, say, some wallpaper, make it look a bit more realistic. So I'm going to use a bump map for that, but I'm just going to use a noise texture as a bump map. So we'll just grab the texture, put the factor into the height, and then the normal into there. And now you can see how this looks. It looks terrible. So you need to first of all really up the scale, you know, 160, 200, that kind of range. Put the detail all the way up, and then just really bring this strength down. So like anywhere above 0.1 really is going to look like too much. But you'll just notice this, it'll look a lot better in the end if the wallpaper's got a little bit of texture to it. It's one of those things, again, you don't really notice what's wrong until you can model it yourself. But put this scale up until it looks about right. You should barely be able to tell at this point. You can only tell if you really zoom in. I might just move my camera actually a little bit, so I can just lock the camera to view and just move that down a little bit, just so that the sky looks a bit more realistic, because obviously the sky's very blue at the moment, it's got no land in it. To save me from modelling the land, I'm just going to cut out anywhere where it would be. I'll just have it facing up, and you can always add other things in the background. So maybe I'll add like a telegraph pole, so that's a fairly easy model. Just make a cylinder, move that around. I'll just scale it Shift Z so that it's scaling on everything apart from the Z axis. Make it just like that, and then if I press Shift S and cursor to selected, that means that when I'll add something new, it'll be in the middle of it. So I can just add one of these, scale that, there we go, put that, and then if we just select them all and then Control J, it'll just make one object out of them, and then I can just put that, you know, put that outside there, move it away a bit. I'm just using Shift Z there to move it not on the Z axis, and then give it material and just make that black. There we go, it just adds a little bit of interest outside the room, makes it look a little bit more realistic. And then you can always add some, you know, add some wires. So to add the wires, I'll just select one of those, Shift Z to do that same little trick, and then I'll add a path in, just bring that, you know, edit that a bit so that it's you know, peaking in the middle like that. Shift and then X to just bring it out a bit, and then I can just make it so that the peak's on there, duplicate it, join them all, and then in geometry I'll just add a bit of depth. 0.1, 0.01's even a bit much, I'll put 0.01, just put the material as that same black one so that you can see them. There, that's a bit better. I probably need to just extend these even further, so I'll just select these three, G and then X, and then just bring them out until there. There we go. And now if we look at that bit, you know, that's just added a bit more visual interest outside. It looks a little bit better to me anyway. I mean, this is just, it's all just personal preference, so I'm just adding things which I think will make the scene look nicer. You don't have to add this, but you can add more. You know, you can do whatever you want. You can model a whole landscape outside if you like, or you can use an HDRI which basically does it for you. This is probably going to be about where I'm going to leave this scene until I'm putting all the little extras in, so hopefully this has been a bit of an insight into how I go about making a scene and how I use little tips just to speed up the process. So I've made a fairly full scene here, I just need to add some little details, add some cushions and things in fairly little time. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, just consider subscribing. I'll be making more videos like this. And comment if you've got any ideas for future videos or any questions about this one. Thanks for watching.